that gets really, really interesting when you start talking about how Bitcoin works and why it's so similar to the primary value delivered function of militaries. It's because all civilization, all living creatures obey the social consensus protocol that those who project the most kinetic power in the most clever way earn the right to set the state and chain of custody of limited resources. No one gets the option to like unsubscribe from this social consensus protocol, right? Those who project the most kinetic power set the state and chain of custody. Okay. That is true not only for animals, right? Like if I threw a juicy steak in between a pack of wolves, who gets the steak?
Whoever gets there first, whoever's the strongest.
Right. So animals actually establish their own pecking order based off of their capability to project power. Mm-hmm. Right. Humans are no different. We're animals too. There's limited resources. It is an existential necessity for us to establish a pecking order to achieve consensus on the legitimate state and chain of custody of all property. We do it through kinetic power projection. The cool thing about kinetic power projection is it's a permissionless protocol. I don't need the permission of another country or another person if I can project enough power in a clever way, right? That's how you establish a permissionless control structure over all, as you would say, analog property. But what was really, really fascinating about Bitcoin specifically is that it takes this exact same power projection game, right? But instead of kinetically derived joules, it's electrically derived joules. And that is really, really interesting. It works effectively the same exact way as militaries do. What's the role of the military? The role of the military is to project so much kinetic power that it's too expensive not to cooperate with whoever owns that military, right? That's the main deal. The role of the military is to countervail the control authority of someone that has been oppressive, right? So the reason why the United States exists is because people in North America started feeling that the monarchy was being oppressive to them. So they exercised their permissionless control structure over property. And here we are. Now we identify as Americans. So like that's important to point out. It's not just because you see this all the time on Twitter. People are bashing that like USD, is proof of war. Literally everything is proof of war, Anthony. Like if you identify as a citizen in a country, that is because people projected a bunch of kinetic power to create that rule of law. Like the state of ownership of everything is as a result of either kinetic proof of work or contractual legal proof, which only exists because someone won a war to legitimize that. Okay, so how is Bitcoin different? Bitcoin takes the exact same game, right? That all animals have been playing for 4 billion years, but it transposes that game digitally. So instead of kinetic proof of work, you do electric proof of work. Those who project the most electric power and win the competition earn the right to set the state and chain of custody of the underlying piece of property, in this case, Satoshis. And if those entities, which we would call miners, ever become oppressive, right? If they ever just start mining empty blocks and not allowing people to transact over the ledger, then the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that it restores the ability for all users to countervail the control authority of those oppressors through what? Projection of power. And in Bitcoin denominated terms, it always gets easier to project more power. It's never been cheaper to mine, right? It's cheaper to mine now with an S19 than it is to mine with your USB miners from a while ago in Bitcoin denominated terms, which means it's always getting easier and easier for users to countervail the control authority of oppressors if they emerge. And so that's interesting because then what effectively is the primary value delivered function of Bitcoin is not to create a piece of digital property. That part to me is boring. The part that is interesting to me is you have restored a permissionless control structure over a property using the exact same way, like the exact same mechanism as warfare. And you've done so after civilization has effectively stalemated itself with nuclear power. The problem with nuclear weapons is it's too expensive to use them, right? So civilization has lost their ability to have permissionless control structure over property, right? Does that make sense? Like
it makes complete sense.
Yeah, we risk nuclear annihilation.
Correct.
To use this power projection protocol now. So that's bad. By the way, it's not the first time it happens. It happens all the time in nature. So animals will actually grow random power projection mechanisms out of their foreheads so that they can continue to play the game and establish pecking order and to achieve consensus on the legitimate state and chain of custody of resources like territory, right? We call them antlers, right? We call them, look at bugs with their weird horns on the top, right? They evolved a way to continue the power projection game, but do so in a way that won't threaten the species, right? Like we're not going to kill each other anymore. We're just going to awkwardly clash our antlers together. And then that's how we're going to decide who gets to own what. And so this sounds ridiculous, I know, but I keep telling people Bitcoin are human antlers. We have reestablished a way to achieve a permissionless control structure over property, which is needed to defend against oppression, but still maintain fairness, right? Still maintain the ability to achieve consensus on the legitimate state and chain of custody of a property. And so that's pretty cool. We should probably monetize that, right? And like people are like, well, there's no way Bitcoin would ever, end war. It's like, no, I'm not saying it would end war, right? Like obviously kinetic power projection would still be necessary for all forms of physical property that people value, right? Like there's low probability that I'm going to stop valuing water, that I'm going to stop valuing, land, that I'm going to stop valuing contracts, that I'm going to stop valuing oxygen. But no one says we have to monetize those things. What if the cool thing about money is it can take any shape it wants? It's a shape-shifting thing. And so if you transpose money into a digital commodity and reestablish a power projection permissionless control structure over it, then what you've effectively done, and I know this is wacko, but what you have effectively done is digitally transformed warfare itself from a kinetic power projection game into an electric power projection game. And so insofar as we fight each other to defend against money, we don't need to. And the last thing I'll say before opening it for comments is this. And this is why I drew that picture, because
we have the picture. We have the picture here that we're going to show everyone.
Okay, so the thing, I wrote this in class. I was not paying attention to class. The thing that bothers me about like these ESG accusations against Bitcoin is like they fundamentally misunderstand what the point of Bitcoin is, right? They fundamentally misunderstand what the point of all that energy or all that power projection is. The point of projecting that much power is to make it too expensive to attack the ledger, right? Like to make it too expensive to be uncooperative with the people who use Bitcoin. This is exactly what the military does, right? The power of every single bomb, the power of every single bullet, the power of every single engine behind every single plane or ship or sub or truck or tank, the power of every heartbeat of every service member of every military in the world is measured in watts. And those watts are spent explicitly to protect and defend resources, up until Bitcoin to protect and defend monetary resources. And to say that Bitcoin is a waste of energy is effectively the same as saying your military is a waste of energy. It's a waste of energy to have a standing military to protect our rule of law or whatever we're trying to protect. Like, yeah, it's inefficient to sail a bunch of carrier battle groups through the ocean, right? You know, it's more inefficient, Anthony, than sailing a bunch of carrier battle groups or testing about a bunch of nuclear missiles all the time. Being invaded, being conquered, that's pretty inefficient. And if you want to learn what happens to people who decide not to build a standing military, read history. History is literally just, a story of all the countries that decided that it was too inefficient to have a standing military, right? And so it's like, Bitcoin's bad because it projects too much power. It's like saying, dollar for dollar, I wish my military projected less power. So you don't understand the point of Bitcoin. The point of Bitcoin is to defend the network, to defend every user that volunteers to make that underlying piece of property their form of money.